Born in Wisconsin, raised in Texas, adopted, lauded, possibly genetically copywritten by the South by Southwest Film Festival, and at varying points unironically possessing all of the following facial hair decisions, David Lowery has staked his claim on the American indie film scene as the auteur-director equivalent of a pickup truck full of Nietzsche manuscripts, a unique contemplative voice with one foot in the art house and the other in the smokehouse, except I think he's also vegan, whose films, regardless of genre, strike a strange tone between the playful detached whimsy of postmodernism and the grimy muscular sincerity of whatever you'd call as far opposite that you can go without just straight up making Panos Cosmatos movies. The previous apotheosis of this was probably his 2017 film A Ghost Story, an otherwise very serious, very deliberate, haunting, and haunted supernatural drama wherein the dead characters literally appear as bedsheets with two eye holes cut in them to indicate that they are ghosts. You can either go with this, or you cannot. The Green Knight marks an even further leap into that kind of formalism for formalism's sake atmosphere, taking material that Lowery's apparent narrative leaning towards tales of rough-hewn men making hard decisions in harder worlds feel almost too well suited to here among the most straightforward dad advice fables in the Arthurian, if not Western canon, a lengthy quest narrative whose moral nonetheless boils down to, bro, you gotta take your hits like a man, and processing it backwards into the fog of myth from whence one imagines it came, through filters of tone and texture that owe more to the Brothers Grimm than Thomas Mallory, with extremely fair helpings of John Borman's Excalibur layered on top. The kind of medieval storytelling adaptation that's at once very literal and also answers anyone who ever asked, what were they on when they wrote this, with lots of things. Everything was bad for you back then, the weather was terrible, everyone was sick all the time, nobody knew shit about medicine, chemicals, or food preservation, most people were slowly going mad and dying all the time from one thing or another that rotted your brain, and that's why they believed in wizards. So if you like your swords and sorcery to pair better with a black light and a bong hit, well, he is called the Green Knight after all, and he certainly does look like he jumped right off a poster in the back area of a Spencer's Gifts. Diverging from the original text in a few plot details, but not even a little bit in spirit, so if you remember this one from middle school English lit, congratulations, you'll be ahead of everyone else. Our setting is Dark Ages Britain, and our story concerns Dev Patel, and not that it f***ing matters since none of these people existed, but yes, it is historically plausible and appropriate for him to be here. Shut up is Sir Gawain of Camelot, nephew of King Arthur, and in this version, kind of a scamp who'd like to graduate to full knighthood and join the Round Table, but there hasn't really been a lot of knighting opportunity of late, and he is kind of a dipshit as well. Also, his mother is Morgan Le Fay in this telling, so that kind of complicates things. Though apparently not as much as you'd think, I must again stress they're playing this very it's medieval times, and these are serious people, so there's a lot of talking around stuff without actually saying anything happening. In any case, we're adhering to the myth, so at that year's big Christmas celebration, the monotony of things is broken up by a Green Knight, in this version a lumbering supernatural being seemingly made of vines and branches and plants like a really tall, really butch Groot, shows up and challenges any knight of the Round Table to a game where they get to take a free swing at him, and if they can do it, he gets to take the same one back a year later at his place. Gawain, being an idiot who can't detect an obvious trap, not only steps up to volunteer, but chops the dude's head clean off, and naturally, it does not kill him because this is an obvious trap. So the Green Knight takes off all, okay, see you in a year, not magical guy whose head isn't gonna grow back, and now Gawain has a year to get ready, set off on a quest, meet several unusual characters along the way, and eventually figure out what the hell he's gonna do when he faces the Green Knight again. There's an interlude with some bandits, a fox that may or may not be more than what he seems, a vision of giants that may or may not be a vision, an eerie encounter with Saint Winifred, look it up, the story-mandated dalliance with a strangely behaving king and his wife at a remote castle, but mainly a lot of an extraordinarily worn-out looking Gawain seemingly trudging his way across an even less pleasant looking than you'd picture version of blighted pre-medieval British landscapes, looking so near dead or dying it's impossible to discern whether the nightmare surreal visuals the film begins to drift in and out of are meant to be reality, his own deteriorating delusions, or some of both, a visual evocation of how the age of magic could emerge from people's minds trying to conjure something, anything compelling to focus on in the desolation all around them. Put another way, the overriding idea seems to be that the straighter you stick to the narrative meant for language, ears, and psyche of a time so different from our own, the more organically it's going to warp into something not very straight at all, like the hazy stoner mood piece the Green Knight eventually arrives as. This is, after all, the type of story that it's not the tale but the telling was coined to describe. If you can't already guess what the moral or point of Gawain accepting the Green Knight's challenge then going to meet his fate is supposed to be, you're probably the one who needs to hear it, but otherwise the real point is how the tale around it is drawn out, which flourishes and embellishments are made in the margins and where the teller does and doesn't put their emphasis, all of which suggests a project ripe for solo auteur poise, but well, we're certainly watching Lowery and his crew show off their bang-for-the-buck resource maximizing skills a great deal of the time. Let's see you get compelling cinema out of your fifth long take of one guy walking unhappily across a muddy swamp. A tremendous amount of the actual gravitas ends up falling to the forever underrated Patel, who definitely has to sell the audience on the reality, unreality, and seriousness of everything happening in a given scene to get our bearings. Nothing going on here is precisely familiar, relatable, or feels right in the slightest, which is the point, so it's pretty much up to him to communicate how we're supposed to feel. You know, okay bro, that guy's a tree, scale of 1 to 10, how unusual usual as that in this reality in a given moment and still be a functioning occupant of the story itself as a complicated, somewhat quiet, compelling, but not always all that likable of a main character. That's a heavy order, and he makes it work, particularly in sequences far removed from the rest of his arc in the third act, which are best left to be discovered. It's a hell of a performance that'll hopefully keep the awards committees arguing almost as long as Arthurian mythology scholars are arguing over the rest of it. The whole thing, in fact, represents such a deceptively mid-scale, big-shot play that it becomes a case where does it all actually work starts fighting for headspace with how much does that matter. My gut feeling tells me that, like most films aiming to evoke the weariness of their own journeys, it errs on the side of being a bit longer than it needs to be, though, as is going to be the case with highly meta-adaptation of stories so old we don't actually know how old they are. Your mileage will vary based on when you key in on where they're going with this and how long your attention is going to stay fixed on the actual story, catching up to a point or reveal that you already got. Myself, yeah, I was ahead of it a few times, and it is a bit drawn out, but I liked the trip in several senses of that word, and I was always very much engaged. 8 out of 10, very different, very worth seeking out.